Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
And this is why now, obviously when the banning orders come out in the 90s, it ruined a lot. You know, we had 100 lads strong, messed. And obviously the banning orders, so we'll dwindle down. You know, some lads got married, some lads went other ways, but we were still the family.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's how it is. And it's like, even if we didn't have a fight, you still with your family. We class it as a football family. We're a group of lads who enjoy what we're doing, enjoy each other's company, clothes, because a lot of it was fashion.
Yeah.
You know, you had to look the dog's bollocks. You know, you had to look the bollocks. You can't just go in the Primark trousers.
Today we are looking at all the firms and top lads that have been associated with Nottingham Forest over the years. The Trent End Boot Boys, the Forest Mad Squad, the Forest Executive Crew, Paul Scarrott, Gary Boatsy Clark and son Tan Sam. But to name a few. But let's start at the beginning, with the Nottingham Forest skinheads and the Trent End Boot Boys. And then we will get into all the battles the lads have had, such as a famous off against Barnsley. This is what poet and producer Henry Normal had to say about early life in the Trent End. With a knocked chicken and a bow-legged hen was the first line of a song that used to be sung on the terraces at the City Ground back in the early 70s. The singers were mainly skinhead boot boys in the Trent End, and me, a 12-year-old with a centre parting, flares and plimsolls. I was once told after being stopped by a gang of Leicester fans that from the way I dressed, I wasn't worth beating up. I didn't share much with the skinheads apart from a love of football, a working-class sense of humour, and the appreciation of a simple rhyme. This was the start of my interest in poetry. The sight of 100 or so frightening-looking youths all singing with a knocked chicken and a bow-legged hen still makes me laugh. I tried to picture the bloke who wrote the line explaining it to his mates in the pub, trying to persuade them that they'd still look hard while singing it. Sitting on the smoke-filled top deck of a number 60 bus from Bilborough to the city centre, each work morning when I was 18, I wore a parka over my suit and carried a haversack. I was embarrassed to be overdressed. Arriving at the insurance brokers on South Parade, I hid the parka and haversack behind other coats and spent the day in my cheap purple flared suit feeling underdressed. I wasn't at home in either world. There were only a few places in Nottingham I felt drawn to. The first was Selector Disc. If you wanted to buy a Led Zeppelin album back then, you could go to Boots in Victoria Centre, past the women's makeup counters, to a well-lit, clean plastic music section where progressive rock, as it was called then, sat alongside easy listening and traditional jazz. If you swapped the labels round, you could get Deep Purple in rock for 72p as opposed to £3.50, but some poor bogger was then going to have to pay £3.50 for Acker Bilk. The second place I loved was the Midland Group in Hockley, where the National Video Game Arcade is now. The Midland Group was an art gallery and art house cinema that put on live events. It was a bit like a small Lakeside and Broadway combined. For me, it was an oasis. The art wasn't like the art in the castle. I remember seeing a performance artist dressed as a boxer, beating up a bag of onions for 20 minutes. As he punched away, he cried. It was comical. Perhaps unintentionally so, but it was certainly memorable. The roots of Nottingham Forest's hooligan scene trace back to the 1970s, when young fans began organising into firms, groups bound by loyalty to the club, but ready to fight rival fans at a moment's notice. The Forest Executive Crew, or FEC, emerged as the dominant force during the 1980s. The Forest Mad Squad were known for causing trouble, especially at away games, and engaging in violence with fans of other clubs. The group was active before the establishment of the Forest Executive Crew in 1984. The group was reportedly identifiable by their green jackets, which were worn during these incidents.
Oh, yeah. I noticed it. You could tell, there's a lot of trouble at Forest, probably early to late 70s. They used to have a firm called the Forest Mad Squad. And I used to stand on the cop, and the away fans used to be in the east stand to your right hand side, and all you could see was everything going, you know what I mean? There was bloody riots everywhere. And Forest had Andy Firm back in them days as well. I can remember going to the League Cup final, 980, and we were walking down Wembley Way. Next minute, it's about 200 lads in green flying jackets come running past, chasing a load of Wolves lads down Wembley Way. And I was only a kid, you know what I mean? You think, flipping out, what's going off here?
The Effies built a fearsome reputation for their aggressive tactics and readiness to engage in violence. They were known for their tight-knit structure, with members from Nottingham's working-class neighbourhoods. Away games often turned into battlegrounds, a violent show of pride and power. Their biggest rivals were firms from nearby cities, Leicester City and Stoke City, with clashes that often escalated into serious riots. The 80s saw some of the most notorious confrontations, including a string of brutal fights on and off the pitch. The Forest firms were involved in many high-profile violent incidents. One of the most infamous was the so-called Battle of Bedford Place, where the FEC faced Southampton's firm in a fierce confrontation that left lasting scars, both physical and psychological. Another violent chapter was marked by repeated clashes with Leicester City fans, reflecting a bitter rivalry fueled by proximity and football pride. These battles often spilled into city streets, pubs and train stations, with police struggling to contain the chaos. I have a question for you Forest fans. Who do you hate the most? Leicester City or Derby? Let me know in the comment section, I'm curious. Anyway, back to it. Besides the FEC, Nottingham Forest's hooligan scene featured smaller, less organised groups, younger scallies and casuals, who often operated on the fringes of the main firm. These groups sometimes caused trouble of their own, but often looked up to the FEC as leaders of the scene. This is what one proper Forest lad had to say about an off with Derby. I won't mention his name, but he is a proper boy. The following are all his own words. For this one, we parked up in Derby Centre car park and walked to a pub just off Sadler Gate. As we got in the pub, I had a look around, and to be fair, not that many FEC were there. Me, W, NK, DCB and a few others. But most were the new FYL, Forest young lads. I wondered how this would turn out, as most of these FYL were unproven in a big battle. We had just got in this pub and got a drink when W comes in and says, "Derby's mob here now, get out." We all pile out quickly, and sure enough, a big mob is walking up the road. This is right in the middle of the town centre on Sadler Gate, just before the assembly rooms. It doesn't get any better than this. Two mobs about to clash right on their own manner with no OB about. Bang! It's off with both firms going for it. This was hand-to-hand stuff, swapping punches and kicks. On the right-hand side of the road, some FYL have got some mop handles out of a shop that was there, and they are smacking Derby with them around their heads. Derby start to back off. We are all still going for it. We are tight and going forward all the time. Some Derby start to back off, and then they turn and run. We are chasing them up the road. Ahead of me it looks brilliant. Derby running, and a sky full of mop handles and buckets flying through the air at them. Some Derby run into a pub on the left-hand side. We try to get in, but they have locked the doors. We put all the windows in and someone gasses it for good measure. This also happens at the next pub down the road. The town centre is carnage. We carry on chasing them up the road, around the corner and up past the shopping centre. The OB is now everywhere, and they start to get us all together. My heart and head are pounding with all the adrenaline. I am buzzing like mad. That was good stuff. It's not over yet though. The OB get it together and start to escort us to the ground. Loads of Derby are following us on all sides. There was about 30 of us now, as some of ours got lost in the earlier stuff. The police escort was crap as we were spread out and walking too fast. Derby lads were trying to get to us and us to them, with bits of offs going all up the road through OB. We then walk up a side road on the right-hand side over some gardens towards a big pub. Some OB then left big holes in the escort so they could run up ahead to guard the pub up the road. We walked through some gardens, with the odd punch being thrown from both sides. At the top of the road we turned left and the police held us there. Now picture this. There were about 30 of us. On the left-hand side was a 6-foot iron railing. We are going nowhere fast. In front of us was a large pub emptying very quickly. Behind us was a big Derby firm and about 6 OB. If ever Derby had a chance to do us, this was it. There must have been about 100 lads around us. As we were stood there, one of theirs runs up and drops one of ours from the side. We surge forward. OB starts to batter us back with their batons. We are all standing our ground. Derby, for some reason, doesn't come into us. More OB arrives, and they start to hit us again with the batons, forcing us over the railings towards the ground. Good job I was younger and slimmer then. Now, I am just going to show you some footage from an off that the Forest lads had with Burnley. I think it was in Blackpool. I am not allowed to play all the footage, but you kind of get the idea of what's going on. If you was there or you know what happened and who came out on top, then let us know in the comment section.
Also known on the terrace as a suntan Sam.
Suntan Sam, mate.
If you look back at my firm, I've got mixed race lads in there, I've got black lads in there, I've got Asian lads in there.
Mm-hmm.
We're a culture, very loyal people. Yeah. For instance, if one of the lads got in trouble and went to prison, we'd all get together, make sure the kids have got new trainers, make sure the bills are paid.
Yeah, as it should be.
We're a one. I've always said to people, do you know, Hooligan was a Franklin Hooligan. He was an Irishman from London, and obviously he went round pubs drinking, fighting. We don't class ourselves as a pisshead, a drunken. Mm-hmm. I always say I belong to an element of lads who enjoyed violence, but the violence was against people who did what we did.
Yeah.
Not innocent people. Yeah. Not the gentleman sat over there with his son. We're not going to beat you up because you've got a different shirt on.
Yeah.
I'm not beating him up with the head Arsenal shirt on.
He's in it now.
We need to get that across. We're not people who just pick on other people. We are people where
it's a culture.
Organised.
Yeah.
Group of lads, and we go at it.
Yeah.
Which is why now, obviously, when the banning orders come out in the 90s, it ruined a lot. You know, we had 100 lads strong, messed us. And obviously the banning orders, so we'll dwindle down. You know, some lads got married, some lads went other ways, but we were still the family.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's how it is. And it's like, even if we didn't have a fight, you're still with your family. We class it as a football family. We're a group of lads what enjoy what we do, enjoy each other's company, clothes, because a lot of it was fashion.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, you had to look the dog's bollocks.
Mm.
You know, you had to look the bollocks. You can't just go in a Primark trousers and a t-shirt, you put a Stony on. You've got your Beyond Borg, your Tashina. You know you're having a scrap. It's like years ago, before Stone Island you used to have scarves. And when you put a scarf on your left-hand side under your watch, they indicated you was up for a row.
Yes.
Skinheads was a big part in football violence.
Yeah.
The flying jackets, the bother boys and that, the Trent and Boot boys, 60s. You know, and we've gone up Forest, the FYL, Forest Young Lads, and obviously the Forest Executive crew.
When we talk about Forest and their history on the terraces, it's only right that we give one absolute legend a mention. God rest his soul. This guy was highly rated by other firms up and down the UK. He caused a lot of bother abroad too. This is the one and only Paul Scarrott.
England's soccer hooligan. Paul Scarrott from Nottingham is the first English fan to be expelled from the World Cup. He'd been charged with no offence. The decision to deport him was in response to a blacklist provided by British police of known hooligans with a record of violence. The government here says it's delighted that 15 months of hard work and cooperation is paying off.
Paul Scarrott has a string of convictions for football hooliganism. Earlier this year, magistrates in his home city of Nottingham banned him from every local stadium for 2 years. He's already been banned from Nottingham Forest's ground for life. He appears to revel in his notoriety and made no secret of his presence in Italy, where he arrived 2 or 3 weeks ago. Italian police are on the lookout for England's more notorious followers and arrested him at Rome's main railway station. Scarrott was one of a number of known hooligans whose names and pictures are on police computer files. Compiled by this country's National Football Intelligence Unit, with information coming from police videos of hooligans in action, the files have been made available to Italian authorities to try to stop trouble before it starts. Scarrott is the first to be caught and sent home, although yesterday 3 others were jailed for 20 days for vandalism. With the World Cup kicking off in just 3 days' time, the authorities there are taking a tough line with those who threaten to disrupt it.
Today, one spent 2 hours in police detention after failing to produce identification. This, in the absence of free temporary accommodation, could prove to be Cagliari's biggest dormitory. Yet those sleeping on the beach risk arrest for vagrancy, while those on the streets, without a bed for the night or enough money to pay for one, have nowhere else to go, despite official requests.
The British government has actually asked the Italians if there was anything they could do to help in this way, and the local authorities have said there simply are not the facilities available.
And at England's friendly match this afternoon in Oristano, proof that tickets for the World Cup are freely available on the black market. Officially, they're on sale through a national bank on proof of identity. Unofficially, it's £75 for England's 3 matches on the island.
The chap on the pole who was selling to us on the black market got the tickets from the bank. It was just outside the bank. He went in to the bank, bought the ticket, stole the door.
Stories like that are just what the Football Association and the British government don't want to hear, though they'll be pleased to see just how seriously the Italian authorities are taking stadium security. There are no more than 20 English fans here. The police were clearly expecting hundreds. England won the match and friends in Oristano, the final score 10-2. But off the pitch, it seems there are real problems ahead. Rob Bonnet, BBC News.
Is back in Britain after being deported from the World Cup in Italy. He'll be met by police officers as his plane touches down. 34-year-old Paul Scarrott, who's from Nottingham, has been jailed more than a dozen times for soccer violence. He was picked up today at Rome's main railway station, and police say will deport him as soon as possible. Yesterday, Scarrott told English newspaper journalists that he was preparing to launch all-out war on rival soccer fans. Before the start of the World Cup, Paul Scarrott, who's got more than 40 convictions for football violence, had been under surveillance by police since he arrived in Italy 10 days ago.
The authorities are claiming it as their first victory after months of planning to stop British hooligans wrecking the World Cup. Paul Scarrott, the self-proclaimed hooligan leader, being deported from Italy after being arrested at Rome's railway station, where he'd been found wandering around carrying a half-empty bottle of wine. Despite his arrest, he remained defiant.
We will invade Italy, but we will be friendly with Italy.
Police say they've been tracking his movements since he arrived in Italy 10 days ago. And a senior officer explained he was being deported because of his past record. A British dossier on Paul Scarrott in front of the officer told the tale of how he'd been caught. A result of cooperation between the Italian police and the British National Football Intelligence Unit, whose head tonight said Paul Scarrott's deportation won't necessarily be the last.
The unit have been monitoring Paul Scarrott and his actions, his movements about this country for some considerable time now. And we were well aware when he went to Italy about 10 days ago, and we continued our monitoring operation. So we knew where he was and what he was up to. And we passed a considerable amount of intelligence about this man to the Italian policing authorities.
The intelligence unit aren't the only ones pleased at the action taken against Scarrott.
He's been arrested 14 times. Anybody who gets into that level of trouble has got to be an idiot. However, if he's looking for publicity, he's got the right sort of publicity. He's been deported, and he's allowing us to get through to the message to those who might want to cause a little bit more bother.
Within the last hour, Paul Scarrott arrived at Heathrow Airport, where the police whisked him away through a back door. What's happened to him?
Yes, he's been arrested at Heathrow Airport on his arrival here this evening, sir. And he's now being taken to Heathrow Police Station.
The authorities are clearly delighted that the first hooligan scalp they've claimed is also the best known, and the timing may not be accidental. This is the week in which most fans will travel to the World Cup. The government will hope that what's happened to Paul Scarrott will prove to those planning trouble that they won't be allowed to get away with it. Stuart Leicester,
One soccer hooligan is set to get a hot reception when he arrives back in Britain after being deported from the World Cup in Italy. He'll be met by police officers as his plane touches down. 34-year-old Paul Scarrott, who's from Nottingham, has been jailed more than a dozen times for soccer violence. He was picked up today at Rome's main railway station, and police say they'll deport him as soon as possible. Yesterday, Scarrott told English newspaper journalists that he was preparing to launch all-out war on rival soccer fans.
Now let's have a look at another off. This time it's between Forest and Derby. Again, the footage isn't great, but in this era there wasn't great camera phones like there is now.
And anyway, I kept bumping into him in Nottingham every week then. And there was a late bar at the time called Harvey's Bar in West Bridgeford. I used to go there on a Sunday night as a kid, 16. And there was always in there. Anyway, I got friendly with him. And there was always trying to sway me to come away with him to Forest. You know, come with us lot, you know what I mean? And I must admit, I went to a few Leeds games and all they did were wreck things, smash things up. You know, there was that many of them. Mm-hmm. The Forest firm at the time was all in jail because a Middlesbrough kid got killed at Borough. So a lot of the main lads were locked up at the time. And there weren't that many of them, but they were casual. And I was casual. I was casual last year at school. And that's what I liked about the football scene. I was noticing how different firms, different areas, different cities were doing different stuff. You know, I like the way everyone dressed. So I really got into it. And anyway, they got me one week. They said, we're going to Arsenal. Do you fancy going to Arsenal with us? I said, go on then. I relented. So go on, I'll go to Arsenal with you. I went on the service train. I think it was 53 of us went on the service train. Back in the day, the old Ivory Stadium, there weren't many Forest went away in them days. I think it was 1982. And they used to have ticket tape in the middle of the old clock end. And to get to your end, you had to walk through the Arsenal fans. I think I had a Pringle on, faded jeans, wedge haircut. And the old Bill escorted you in, but we just got everybody. I was covered in saliva. Couldn't manage to get to the Forest section. I was just covered in spit. You know what I mean? After the game, we went back to King's Cross. Arsenal landed at King's Cross and there was running riots all over the shop. You know, it was back and forth. Anyway, the police got fed up with it and said, right, you lot stop here on this corner. I think it was about 35. They arrested the whole lot of us, 35 of us, put us in court and got knocked up at Holborn police station. They said, right, you're in court such and such a date. And I said, well, I can't make it. I'm already in court in Leicester that day. So they put the Forest lot had 2 minibuses to go to court in Holborn and they set a trial at Elephant and Castle, IRA court, 2-day trial. So we all had to go down for a two-day trial down at Elephant and Castle. I was more excited about a night out in London, you know what I mean? I think I got £80 fine. You know, and they're trying to send our main lads to prison, but I think they come away with about 150 quid. But back in 1982, it's quite a lot of money, wasn't it? You know what I mean? So I reckon that's when I got the bug with going away with Forest casuals, you know what I mean? Yeah, there's a lot of our lot locked up at the time. One of our lads got 4.5 years at Middlesbrough. A lot of lads got locked up at Middlesbrough 6 months. A lot of the Borough lads got locked up, you know, for a fray. So, you know, it was big prison in them days, wasn't it?
As violence spiralled, authorities responded with football banning orders, restricting known hooligans like Scarrott and others from attending matches or travelling. These legal measures aimed to curb the spread of football-related violence, but often drove the firms underground. By the late 90s and early 2000s, Nottingham Forest's hooligan firms had largely dissipated, with many former members reflecting on a dangerous era. Yet, echoes of that past remain, a subculture of loyalty, violence and identity that still fascinates football fans and historians alike. Today, Nottingham Forest stands as a club transformed, but the history of its football hooligans serves as a stark reminder of football's complex and sometimes dark relationship with its most passionate supporters. I want to talk about a battle the Forest lads had with Southampton that has been labelled the Battle of Bedford Place. Now, in my videos, I always try and stay neutral and get accounts from both sides, so this is what one Southampton lad that was there had to say. The following are all his own words. In the late 80s, Nottingham Forest were another firm to try their luck with their notorious leader Paul Scarrott, at the time the self-titled toughest hooligan in England, leading them into battle. As was standard procedure by then, Forest were destroyed in a crushing victory for the Saints in what became known as the Battle of Bedford Place, which afterwards resembled a scene from Braveheart, and eyewitnesses saying members of the public, including a 75-year-old man and a pregnant woman, as well as the Forest executive crew, were running for their lives. Rumour has it Scarrott was so traumatised at the vicious beating inflicted on he and his mob that day he never recovered and hit the booze to blank out the memory. Sadly, Scarrott died several years later, the wounds still raw. R.I.P. If you disagree with the Southampton lad, then let us know in the comment section. At the time, Millwall were one of the biggest and most highly rated firms out there. But Forest done what not many other mobs did at the time. They took a huge mob to Millwall, took over one of pubs. Some would say that's a liberty, especially to do that at Millwall. And what you have to also remember is that Forest had big numbers on banning orders. So this mob that showed at Millwall was just a fraction of what they could have turned out if everyone was available. It just shows what a force Forest could have truly been. I am not allowed to play audio for this video. It was from a documentary, but it's all right there. Nobody can deny that Forest turned up in big numbers, and it even shows a very well-known Forest lad, who we all know desperately trying to organise an off with Millwall. Fair play, you have to rate that. Doesn't matter what firm you are with, or who you follow. If you have a huge mob land at Millwall, in one of their pubs, and then trying to shake off the police and organise something with them, then you simply have to rate that. This is what one Millwall bushwhacker had to say about Nottingham Forest. He is referencing a different encounter, but it proves that Millwall do rate Forest. These are his own words. We took about 100 firm up there. We played them in the League Cup. A little kid came up and said, Bob, they're here. There was 40 Romany gypsy guys from Newark, Forest boys, all in their 30s and 40s, and they all had weapons. So we've gone down there 25-handed, and we've gone straight into them. This guy went to put an axe in my head. One of my friends, Italian Tony, blocked the guy's arm. This is what BBC News had to say about another incident. An unprecedented security operation was put in place to prevent Forest and Millwall hooligans from clashing in Nottingham. 270 police officers were deployed, 36 pubs were closed, and the kick-off was moved to noon in a successful bid to stop any trouble. But on a much more serious note, the rivalry between the two took a more sinister turn. These were the headlines in the local media. Millwall fan accused of killing rival Nottingham Forest supporter has manslaughter charges dropped. A Millwall fan who admitted a vicious assault against a Nottingham Forest supporter will not be prosecuted for causing the victim's death. Andrew Lewis, who had already admitted attacking 56-year-old Paul O'Donnell outside the City ground in August 2017, had been accused of manslaughter, but prosecutors have now dropped the charge. Miranda Moore QC told Leicester Crown Court that doctors could not definitively say the injuries Lewis inflicted on Mr. O'Donnell caused his death. The Millwall supporter had already pleaded guilty to a separate charge of causing grievous bodily harm by punching the Forest fan during a fight which broke out before the two teams played last year.
I got locked up twice in one Bruges. Was it Anderlecht? Anderlecht got locked up twice there. And the police said next day, him again. Got deported from Bruges, a load of us, frog marched onto the ferry at Zeebrugge. Spent 2 days in the midst of the game, spent 2 days in a police in Bruges, you know what I mean? So then you didn't really bother, you know what I mean? It's just all part and parcel of the fun. You got into the casual scene and you started getting, your mindset started going that way, gang culture and that. It was like, you know, are we going to get something this Saturday? You know, you plan your day all week, you know what I mean? And what we're going to do, where we're going to meet, how we're getting there. And it was a buzz, you know, we're going to meet like-minded lads that want to have a go at you, you know what I mean? And that took over the football then, you know what I mean? But like you say, I'm a football fan, I've always been a football fan, and we know more about football than what people think, you know what I mean?
7 Nottingham Forest fans have been given community orders and told to pay costs after pleading guilty to a fray before their side's opening game of the season against Barnsley.
They've avoided football banning orders. Our reporter Callum Watkinson was at Nottingham Crown Court.
It was the first day of the football season in August last year when a group of young Nottingham Forest fans, and they are overwhelmingly young, all of them under 26, apart from one who is 40, came across a group of Barnsley supporters in Nottingham city centre. They followed them from one bar to another pub, and they then stood outside trying to provoke the Barnsley fans into a confrontation. All of this was captured on CCTV, and at one point you see one of the 7 trying to throw an advertising hoarding through the window of the pub. Well, they weren't arrested immediately. They were picked up by the police in a series of morning raids about a month later, and all of them pleaded guilty to a fray. Sentencing them today, Her Honour Judge Butler QC said she wasn't going to hand out any jail time and she wasn't going to make any football banning orders. All 7 defendants were ordered to pay £250 costs, and all were given community service orders. Well, the judge had the harshest words for the oldest member of the group, Samuel Williams. She told him, "You are far too old to be doing this sort of thing, mixing with younger people and causing this sort of disturbance," and she gave him a 6-month sentence, suspended for 18 months. Well, Forest's first game of next season is a friendly against Villa in August, but the conditions of his, Samuel Williams' sentence mean he won't be going anywhere near the City Ground.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.